Hi, everyone. Welcome to Recommendary Podcasts. We have a fascinating guest today, who is an entrepreneur who's been a math graduate from Princeton, who's done so many things in his life. Got I we met him we met each other through this platform called Lunch Club, and the moment I laid eyes on his profile, I was like, I have to interview this person. I want to know what this person has gone through, and it'll be great for the listeners to just follow his path, understand what inspired him, who inspired him, and then perhaps replicate some of his success in their lives as well. So here we have Shiv Dutt. Welcome to the podcast. So glad to have you here.
Thank you, Gautam. So glad to be here, and thank you for taking time from your busy schedule. I know you have a newborn. I know you're working on 100 different things. So I really appreciate you making the time.
Thank you so much. Just to give you background for the viewers who will be new to Shiv Dutt's journey, he's been in the world of mathematics, and that's certainly a topic I want to touch upon initially. He's been a mathematician. He's been a Wall Street professional. He's been in down the road of investment, trading, and so on, and a lot more to discover in that aspect as well. So that'll be a second theme. The third theme, and the one that he's working currently, is on the theme of entrepreneurship. He's a founder of one of the most productive extensions you'll see in the Chrome ecosystem, which is called MeaVana, and there's a lot of more other things that he has done. So more on that, and I would love to start with the first part of your life journey, which is the world of mathematics, and also the world of Delhi and Gurgaon, how you grew up. So if you could just help me understand how was it like, and what kind of content inspired you throughout the journey.
Absolutely. So yeah, Gautam, I grew up in Delhi, the Delhi Gurgaon area. I moved to actually Gurgaon when it was just pure barren farmland, and now it's this bustling metropolis with Asia's largest mall, and all these fancy companies have their offices there. So I was really seeing I've kind of grown with Gurgaon, and that was great. I went to this high school called Vasant Valley. It's owned by the India Today Group, and just amazing school. Kind of did a lot of good for me. I was involved in a lot of different things. From I think I was academically strong. I was really interested in sports. I did a lot of music as well. So kind of just involved in a lot of different things. And, I went through some hard times there as well. I remember my 11th class was, really, really, really a tough one. I kind of really plummeted. And for many reasons, I kind of let myself go in all sorts of ways. Went through depression. And I remember in the start of our 12th class, right, I wasn't even expecting to probably even become a prefect or anything. But I remember our principal, kind of they announced the prefects, and I was made head boy. And I was kind of shocked because I had this coming from this horrible, but it's so interesting when somebody believes in you, what a world of difference that can make, right? And I ended up going from like basically completely being useless in class 11 to, really crushing it in my 12th grade, where I kind of was valedictorian. I had got a 96% overall, in PCMB, which is considered the hardest stream. And like the next highest was like a 90% in the commerce stream, So it was. I think I was, gone to Princeton, which was great. I ended up captaining our chess team, our debate team, our basketball team, and several other things. Performed various classical music competitions. So it was really transformational, and so I'm very grateful to the school. It did a lot of good for me. So that was Delhi and Vasant Valley, and then the next chapter is Princeton. Happy to move on to that if you're ready.
So you spoke about your early tryst with leadership. You got elevated to a leadership position without even expecting it. How in the life looking back, right, when connecting the dots, how did that influence in the future? Like you can just spend a few time, because a lot of people such as yours, and me, who would be out there, who are young listeners of ours, we're wondering, I don't have the opportunity to be a leader, but if by chance, if I get the leadership opportunity early in my career, what are some of the takeaways that you had, and how did it propel you for the future life?
Absolutely, Gautam. It's a great question. In fact, Gautam, to come to that phrase where, not everybody has the opportunity to be a leader, it's a really interesting observation because, I remember I've been in places where I wanted to be in, in the workplace, we'll come to that later, where I wanted to be in a big leadership position. I wasn't, and it was very frustrating. And how does one deal with that? And one of the quotes I remember coming across was that, if you cannot do great things, that's okay, but you can do little things in a great way, and the thing, so everybody actually has the opportunity to be a leader at some level. It doesn't have to be an official position. every mom, dad, every brother, sister, everybody can be a leader in different, and a leader in different situations. So one of the lessons I think I learned from that, getting to a leadership position with, and I've meditated on it later, is that there are many different leadership styles. And in school, I was very focused on doing things. I was not very necessarily. I was a little bit aloof. So I wasn't. Never necessarily engaged with people at a very deep level. Now that was good, both good and bad, right? It was bad in a way because I wasn't dealing with people at low level problems, right? So that's bad. I'm not helping people at that low level. But in another way, it was really good because it enabled me to kind of be a little bit outside, the hustle bustle, and kind of be in that leadership position. However, one lesson I took from that is, hey, I can also get involved at the low level, and that actually gives more strength both to me and to the people I'm dealing with. So yeah, so leadership comes at different levels, and and it's some of the biggest leaders are like unsung heroes, like soldiers on the border and people we don't necessarily know about, but who are protecting us and then day and night, and displaying amazing acts of bravery. Or I mean, I think I've even heard this phrase that every parent, right, to a newborn is like a hero, right? Once you have a newborn, you see how hard it is, and I'm not speaking from experience, but and there's that Mariah Carey song that a hero lies in you, right? You finally discover the truth that a hero lies in you. I think everybody has the opportunity to be a leader, and there are many different leadership styles, So there's no really one style, and one has to adapt one style to the situation, because one approach may work in some situations, may not work in another.
Great. I mean, I completely agree to that. And for me also, one of the things that changed in my life personally is being involved in sports. So that gave me a lot of takeaways for me personally. Such as you've mentioned about sports yourself. So what that gave me is a sense of purpose to be part of something more than myself at that young age. To be part of a sports team, to be involved in sports. The fact that you have to sacrifice something for the larger good, to be working towards a bigger goal. I think a variation of leadership that is shown in sports is something that really added value in my life. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing. So I want to now move from, we were in Delhi before, and now we want to move into Princeton, and to compare both. As far as I understand, having been in that part of the country, it's a very gritty place to be. India in itself is a very, not for like what we see in Instagram reels, not for novices, it's not for beginners, it's for experts. So being in that situation where you have to, fight for everything, you have to be competitive, you have to come up on top, and you did as well, and kudos to you for that. Now you're moving into a space where the world is much more evolved and sophisticated, and people are much more compassionate. People are compassionate both ways, but it's a different kind of different culture altogether. How did you adapt, and what was the life like in Princeton? I'd love to know.
Awesome. Love the questions, Gautam. Yeah, no, thank you. Princeton was amazing in retrospect. I'm really glad I went through it, and there were ups and downs, and it was really a roller coaster ride. There was a lot of I had traveled to the US a lot before, so I was very familiar with the culture in some ways. I hadn't lived there and hadn't interacted with people my age much, but so it wasn't really so much culture shock. I would sometimes go for vacations to the US and come back to India and get culture shock because there's so much poverty in India. You see people begging, and so it wasn't like a brand new thing, but it was the first time I was living there. I was 17. I'd left home. I'd never made my own bed. I'd never cooked for myself or done any of that. So and I was with different people from different cultures. I had a Jewish roommate. With my suite of freshman roommates. There was one black guy, one Jewish guy was my immediate roommate, one Indian guy, but he was born in the U.S., one American Asian. So it was and then one white guy from proper the heart of the U.S. So it was a really nice mix, and there was a lot of different people. So it was a really nice melting pot, and everybody was really smart. I think some of the biggest what changes, or kind of not shocks, but things that were very new were in India, I feel like there was some kind of separation between like good students and bad students, right? People who are good students, they didn't party, they didn't drink, they didn't do drugs, whereas people who are bad students, they engaged in all those activities. Whereas I saw one thing that I noticed at Princeton is that the people who were doing the best were also partying the hardest, and they were also and kind of I instinctively stayed away from that initially because I was just like, hey, I'm focused on what I'm doing. So that's one thing that was a little bit different. A second thing that was a little bit different is it was the first time I kind of faced significant failure. where I think, coming from Basmali, where I just succeed in everything I'd done without sometimes even trying. I was not even thinking about the success. I was just doing what I was doing, and success would just follow. But here at Princeton, I majored in mathematics, which was considered by many to be the hardest major. There were a lot of kids there who had, been winning international math Olympiads since they were like 10 years old. So that was like the competition. And I hadn't even competed in an Olympiad before. And John Nash, for example, A Beautiful Mind, he was there, Nobel laureate. He had actually taught part of a game theory class I'd taken. The valedictorian of my class, he was actually, his parents were math professors, name was John Pardon. He actually came in taking harder level classes, graduate level classes than I took going out. So there were people from different levels of preparation, different, career paths. So in Vasmali, in India, everybody was doing CBSE, everybody was on one track. There were a few different streams, but it was basically, it was very equalizing. Here, everybody's come from different parts of the world with different levels of preparation, different interests. You can choose to push yourself. You're not told that you have to do these 5 subjects, PCMB. So there's a lot of choice. And in fact, one feedback I got is that, in Indian culture, people are told what to do. Whereas in the US, people often, they're deciding from themselves very early on. Like even the decision to go to college, right? Later in the workplace, I met people who decided not to go to college. They said it's a big expense. For me, that was never anything I even considered, right? So there was a lot of those decisions. So those are some of the things that kind of stood out. And then even things like basketball. For example, I captained my basketball team. I'm 6'2", so I'm relatively tall. But in Princeton, when I got there, I found I was like too short to even make the team. So there were a lot of, everything was more professionalized. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of scope for adding value. There's a lot of diversity. There's a lot of respect for the individual, and there's a lot of exciting stuff happening. In whatever dimension one wanted. And so I'm really glad I went through it. Almost every job I've gotten, has been through the Princeton network. The alumni community is really, really strong. It's a small school, so like someone like Harvard, Stanford, or some of the others, it's got no business school, no law school, no med school, so it's fully focused on the undergraduates. So I'm really glad I went there. Small, focused, hyper focused, and really, really got to meet. Everybody there I think was incredibly smart, incredibly talented, incredibly driven. There's something amazing about them. But it's done me a lot of good, and I hope I'm able to contribute back at some point in a significant way.
And, and, and at this point, I want to know, since you mentioned this to be a very transformative experience, I'm sure that you must have come across a lot of content in terms of the books, the podcast, articles, cinema, or even people for that matter. And you mentioned John Nash for instance. If you can mention some more that have influenced you, and then how it set you up for success, both in Princeton and for the future.
Absolutely. It's a great question, Gautam. My reading, my absorption of media, the media I'm absorbing has kind of changed over time. So I guess for high school
Yeah.
and early stages of Princeton, some of the books that really inspired me were actually recommended by my father. He was a big influence in my life early on. So, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which is a philosophical exploration of a father and son and using principles of Zen, to a journey, a motorcycle journey.
Yeah.
Jonathan Livingston Seagull, really inspired that by that book. A seagull who just tries to fly higher and higher and just surpasses all limits. Despite being pulled down by the other seagulls. That was a really inspirational book. There were some just standard classic movies like The Lion King. Just beautiful story. I think very, very well done. So those are some of the influences I had early on. But, I read a lot of chess books. I was really into chess. I had the opportunity to play Vishwanath Anand actually twice, which was really nice.
Wow.
So when I got to Princeton, I did that. When I got to Princeton, I read a lot for my classes because the reading list was so long and you could go deeper and deeper. And so I got a lot into philosophy. I used to actually read a lot of popular science also when I was younger. So books on string theory. So not the mathematical formula, but the English versions, explanations of them. Books by like Brian Greene. Books on evolutionary biology, the selfish gene. So that whole genre, and I think that really kind of influenced my thinking. And so when I got to Princeton, I took a lot of that reading. I had a lot of knowledge of the historical foundations of math and physics and all of that. And then I now was trying to do it in a more technical and actual professional way. So that those are some of the influences I think very early on. So philosophy, math, popular science, biology, lot of stuff like that. As I got into the workforce, the stuff I looked at changed. But we'll talk about that.
Sure. And I want to, now that you mentioned a lot of books around science and philosophy and maths, I want to know, all three, what drew you into it? I mean, what part of your mind sort of said, okay, maths is an area I want to graduate on. This aspect of maths is something that I resonate myself with, or for that matter, science and philosophy. I really want to get into your, that aspect of your mind. If you can just, spend some time on that.
Absolutely. Great question, Gautam, and I have a very interesting answer, I hope, to it. I wanted to do math in the US, maths in India and the UK, for many reasons. One is
Okay.
some childhood experiences, actually. I have memories and even pictures of my dad. My dad is in the merchant marine, and I would sail with him for many of part of the year. And I was weak at math. Like, we'd have multiplication tables, and I have distinct memories of kids who were able to do the multiplication in their heads, double digits and this and that. And I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. And many other things that didn't come to me naturally. I just seemed to be naturally weak at it. But my dad
Yeah.
trained me up, and I got very strong at it. And in fact, I would start winning these speed math competitions and all. And I think I got the highest grade math in our board exams. And so it was a very good lesson early on that I've kind of lived with today. That like a lot of people I meet today, I hate math. I have a phobia of math. And I look at them and I often feel that, hey, that was me at one point. But almost
Mhm.
everything trained, and maybe not to like superstar level, but to a high level of proficiency. So that was one lesson I learned. And then when I went to Princeton, again, I found, hey, I didn't even have the prerequisites. Like in CBSE, we do calculus, right? We don't do multivariable calculus. We don't do linear algebra. All the math majors, they'd
Right.
already done that. So I was like more than a year behind the people who were majoring in math.
Right.
There were a lot of people who came like me, who wanted to major in math. They're like, hey, we're not prepared. We're not going to do this. We're not going to waste our time. So it was back to, it was like, hey, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, right? They say like, this is familiar. Again, I'm like not prepared. And so I felt that internal confidence that I'm going to train myself. This time I didn't have my dad guiding me, but I'm going to train myself and I'm going to, rise. So there was that
Yeah.
element to it. The other element was just some of the professors I had early on. So there's this guy, Peter Sarnock. He's the world's leading analytic number theorist. And he was like this tough army general. And when he kind of came into our class, though, he taught me my second class. I remember he was like, my name is Sarnak. I am Sarnak. And the words that came to my mind were intellectual soldier. And that was really
Mm.
inspirational. And he kind of weaved a little bit of philosophy too into his class, and it seemed like a beautiful life. And I studied some of the stuff he had done, and not technically, but and the implications, and it had that same flavor that chess had that I really liked. So that was another
Right.
aspect. John Nash, of course, was there. I'd seen A Beautiful Mind. I was like, wow, I'm actually getting to take a class with this guy. John Conway, who actually passed away in COVID, unfortunately, but Game of Life, he's another very, very famous guy. And I was like, hey, I'm actually in the environment where all these people have been reading about for years. They're actually there. All the stuff. Einstein was here at the Institute for Advanced Study. So I was like, hey, man, I'm really lucky to have this opportunity, and I've got to make it count. So that was another reason for doing that. And some of the students, these IMO medalists and all, since the age of 10, there's a girl I liked as well. And I was like, wow, they've been doing like this high level stuff since the age of 10. Like, how lucky am I to be here? Then finally, math from another perspective, like for example, philosophy. Like I think philosophy is awesome, but it's very, in some ways, it doesn't. It applies to the real world, but it's not doesn't really directly translate into a job, right? With math, there
Yeah.
was a lot of things. We saw people going into academia, people going to law school, med school, people going
Mm.
into actuarial sciences, people going into other quantitative fields, finance, quant trading. So it could directly translate into a role. So math was this
Right.
perfect mix between something like abstract, but also very, very applied that could be applied to the real world. So that's another thing that really inspired me. And then also from a more philosophical perspective, I was like, math applies everywhere. If you look at our physical universe, right? String theory,
Yeah.
quantum mechanics, general relativity, special relativity, all of it is mathematical. If you look at the financial world, economic systems, all of that is driven by math. It's really mathematical at a deep level. If you look at social dynamics and all, actually, a lot of it can actually be modeled mathematically. A lot of us are doing that intuitively, right? We have algorithms running in our heads of how to deal with people. So there's that aspect. All engineering, fluid
Yeah.
mechanics, electricity, magnetism, like all of that derives from math. And then it's also a beautiful art form. There's some forms of math like number theory, pure number theory, and all that. Really, I mean, number theory also applies to cryptography, but they're just beautiful art forms in and of itself. For example, John Conway, the game of life, right? Or he invented some other
Yeah.
game like that. And somebody then asked him, what's the application to it? What's the point of it? And Conway looked at them perplexed and he's like, what? It's just a game. So it's just beautiful in and of itself. It's like a beautiful chess game. So for all those reasons, I was like, hey, this is what it is. Like, it's the and then just the way of thinking. logical way. There was like, for example, it was very interesting coming from India, right? We didn't really have strong humanities. I didn't major in the humanities. So I thought I was really going to struggle writing papers and the humanities, but I thought my math and physics and science was strong, right? Opposite ended up happening. I was a straight A student in the humanities. I never got less than, I think. So which at Princeton was, they had grade deflation all, which is quite impressive. But in my math and physics classes, I really struggled. I did really badly in some. I was, I think, a little above average when in others. Some I did really well. With Conway, actually, I got an A plus. Because he had this crazy way of teaching. That the standard traditional math majors couldn't kind of deal with. And so math was just, it had just all these different aspects, and so it's like, and it just applied everywhere, astrophysics, whatever. Even philosophy, like just a lot of philosophy is really, really mathematical. I was looking at like Gödel's incompleteness theorem or logic, and so I was like, hey, I've got to train myself in this. It's too important, too critical for all those reasons.
Understood. And this is great. I think as we were speaking, what came to my mind is philosophy and maths are two sides of the same coin, is what I feel. Philosophy tries to deduct things of a lot of different instances that we see in the life, and philosophy say, hey, what is common between all these things? Let's create a theory behind. Let's create a abstract concept that explains all of this. While maths is about explaining things in explaining each of these instances separately. I'm going to create a formula that explains this. I'm going to explain this instance of life. So in a way, it kind of philosophy is more of an abstract explanation. Mathematics is more specific, more logical, more analytical, more stepwise, methodical explanation. It's what I feel is what I feel is happening, and I think I kind of understand why you are attracted to it. It kind of helps you to make sense of the world. It kind of makes you to make sense of things happening around you, and it also gives you a sense of purpose also, because I see that in your life, if there is a common theme, is rising from the ashes, rising from down and out to coming up and succeeding in where you were once weak at. So that's a pattern that's keep on emerging, and that's lovely to see, and that's inspiring also in many ways. Because to be taking up something that you were weak in while you were a child takes a lot of guts, to take a lot of gumption and perseverance for that also, and to be in a foreign country, to be amongst people who are such high achievers, to be in the sharing the same spaces as legends once did, and to be succeeding there, it takes a lot of courage, and kudos to you for that, and hopefully a lot of people will get inspired by this and take up the option of mathematics as a career choice, which we don't see often in India, at least. Maybe because of the education system, maybe because the way the recruiters look at maths as a very academically oriented subject and not as like you said, something that cuts across horizontally, across domains, whether it be management, finance, other STEM subjects. So for some reason, people don't view it that way. Hopefully, it changes after people like you, start speaking about this like we do right now. So thank you for that. And now I want to move into the later stages of your college life, which is towards the end of graduation. What is your mindset like? Where how do you want to explore life? In terms of the work, in terms of the life after that.
Thank you, Gautam. Yeah, an excellent summary. I really appreciate the way you summarized it. So interesting you asked, because the end of my college life really changed, right? So I came into college with, going broad. I studied languages. I studied ancient Greek. I studied, Russian. I actually went to Russia for a summer program. I studied a lot of humanities, and math, not only like we were saying, cuts across the STEM subjects, but even the humanities. Like I took a music class, and we found that math, like Bach, for example, right? It's purely math. It's like math put into music, right? You write a few algorithms, you put a few rules, it was all rule based. So it's really beautiful to see. I took a dance class too, where, classical dance had all these rules and formations, right? So math applies there as well. And then you strip away some of the rules when you get modern dance, you strip away more and you make more flexibility and you get postmodern, So everything, actually, even the papers, I took a writing seminar, I did very well in that. I actually got selected to be kind of, I think, published for one of the papers I'd written. My professor really liked it. Even the format there, there's patterns and all, which I think one learns from math. But so I came in, exploring and all. I think very quickly I decided that, hey, math is for me. Exactly that same pattern, right? It was my weakest subject. My weakest grades were math. There was that, desire to prove myself. And then I think my junior year, so after my third year, after coming back from summer in Russia, I was like, I'd studied a lot of things. I was like, now I'm going to focus completely on math. I'm going to go deep into it. I'm going to go really theoretical, and I'm going to get to the top, right? That was my thing. And my reaction to it was just went deep into these hard math classes. And what was really interesting is I ended up doing the worst ever that semester. when I was like doing all these other things and doing math, by the way, I was getting better grades, I was having more fun. And when I went deep into it, I didn't end up doing worse. So I reacted to that by the next semester taking 6 hard math, physics, computer science classes all in one semester. The usual load is 4 or sometimes 5. I'd taken 6 both previous semesters as well, but they were not all of them were hard math, right? And so
Yeah.
like really, really hard class I wasn't prepared for at all. And the result was that I really got myself into a really bad situation. You know, I couldn't
Mm.
manage the classes. I was, trying to use resources. I was trying to like, get help from people, which is, maybe not even completely ethical. I don't even know, I was like us.
Yeah.
I was running problem sessions where they were very helpful traditionally, but they're not committed to helping you necessarily, the TAs and
Mm.
stuff. And I ended up having to, and there's a lot of other details we don't have to get into, but I ended
Yes.
up dropping 2 classes. So I went from like taking the most classes ever to like the least classes ever. I got the worst grades ever. And so I came back that senior year and I kind of did a 360. I decided to completely broaden out again. I took very different classes that I had not taken as well. I switched completely to applied math. So I tried to apply math to
Okay.
the real world, easier classes. I broadened out. I,
Mm.
got a new set of roommates, which was really nice. Otherwise, I was in single. I was completely focused. I started applying for jobs. So I think I got much more. I started going to eating clubs, which were these kind of like frat houses, party clubs. I started dating some people. So it was just a very different life to the life I'd lived before. So so I think my senior year was all about then getting. I'd never interned before, never worked in a really professional environment. So it was all senior year was having fun. I started doing taekwondo. I started doing ballroom dance. I competed on both those teams. So senior year was very, very different, and it was a segue into the working world. I'd say into Wall Street and finance. I never thought I would work in finance. I hated finance. I never felt that the goal of life should be to make money. I felt I should follow. And I thought finance was. I thought math was purer, deeper. But my thinking really changed, and we will talk about that. But that was the end of college. That was.
Yeah. So naturally, the question comes in: what changed in that period, the final year? Was there some content, some people, some books, some podcast or some cinema that changed you in this course in the last final few years, or even in the beginning of the work life? If you can just spend some time, if there are some suggestions around that.
Yeah, actually, it was a feedback from a lot of friends, and one of the
Yeah.
feedback came was that have fun, you know,
Okay.
and have more fun, right? Don't necessarily
Yeah.
be so achievement oriented. Another feedback
Mm.
point was don't try too hard, because
Right.
sometimes we try really hard, we just stress ourselves out and all. The time is just going to pass anyway. A lot of things are out of your control. So that was another feedback point that came. Another feedback point is, you need to be more real world. You're in your
Yeah.
balloon, you're thinking about high abstract math that doesn't apply to anybody that like 5 people in the whole world can understand, uh, you know, why are you stressing yourself so much about that? The other lesson that came out was that, hey, I actually know very little. And like however much I
Mm.
know, I'm just like I'm struggling with these few math classes, but there's a whole body of knowledge out there.
Mm.
Another lesson that came out for me is, hey, when this ties to the leadership experience that we were talking about in high school, that I should be
Mm.
more social, and I should get involved
Yeah.
with people at the low. Usually, I would try and avoid at low level problems, right, and actually engage with people more.
Mm.
I hadn't dated all before that. I was just so busy with, and so I was like, hey, there's aspects of my life that are getting missed. And then even long-term plans, so I think it's a lot of, it was not so much from reading, but more from talking to people and interacting with people
Got it.
that I would go to parties and I never enjoyed dancing. It was fine. I would,
Mm.
but not, but so I actually started studying dance. I joined ballroom dance. I took a dance class, studied the theory, actually try to understand at an intellectual level, like why do people like to dance? What is it about that? So I think it was really influences from talking to people in real life experience as opposed to actually reading and content at that point that really
Got it.
shifted.
Got it. And this resonate with me as well because I believe in balance of life. I believe you need to have if life is to be visualized, as something, I would visualize it as a bunch of parallel lines, going simultaneously, kind of encouraging each other to come up at the same level. That's how I would visualize it. And I'm glad that you discovered that in your college life, where you're seeing relationships are important, hobbies are important, art is important, academics are important, healthy life is important, fitness is important. So you kind of manage everything together, and I think each of the energies of these different parallel lines kind of fed on to each other, and I think kind of set you up for success later in the life. And that's where I want to move into. your first job and for all the following jobs in life on Wall Street, right? And we've all heard about it, and there've been a lot of cinematic representation of it, including Wolf of Wall Street, which is one of my personal favorite. But I'm sure that reality is far different. What are the realities like of somebody of an Indian who is out there, who's done mathematics, who's joining the workforce? What is your mindset like, and how do you move forward with it?
Absolutely. I took the feedback, really to heart. I think I was really influenced. I was impressionable, really influenced by people, and so I started applying for jobs. And I had not interned anywhere. Most of my friends and all who were, going into the workforce had already done internships. That was my final year of college. So I basically didn't hear back from almost anyone, right? Well, no, that's not true.
Right.
I got a lot of interviews and all, but like a lot of the big companies, standard tracks and all, I was just not on that track, right? And I was applying everywhere here and there, so I was all over the place. There was a pull towards finance, and why? Because I think I had some family who had worked there, who recommended. The math background is very useful there, and so I actually got several offers towards the end, but that came after a lot of failure and a lot of trial and applications and tribulations. But I had a few offers. I almost accepted a job. It was on Wall Street. It was with a they were doing basically technology for a lot of hedge funds and startups and all, so managing the tech for them. So I was very close to accepting that, but it wasn't like, this is like amazing. It was just like, hey, this will be a job, right? And then and then suddenly, I think through a referral, I got called for an interview with this hedge fund called Alphadyne. Now these were a few guys out of Princeton, actually. The team I was on, it was three guys. Two of them were from Princeton. One of them was 4 years my senior. He was class of 5 years my senior. He was class of 2006. He was a math major. He was top of his class. He was like a really, really hardcore smart major. His name was Josh Brody. And I don't know, but from what I heard around, he was 4 years out of school and he had this like crazy multi-million dollar bonus, at after 4 years. And so they interviewed me and they just brought me on. I think because I had no background, but I think just for attitude, and just for interest. And they brought me on into it was like a 6-month long internship. So that's the deal. It was a very small niche hedge fund. These kind of funds, you can't even get jobs with them. They have to come through referrals. So I had somebody who had worked before who knew my family who referred me, and I was like, yay. It was funny. So it was these two guys from Princeton. There was another guy who's from the US, but his name was also Shiv Chakraborty. So it was funny. Josh, I remember, was at one point asking us, hey, how do we differentiate between, because a high pressure trading environment, how do we distinguish between the Shivs? So should we call you Shiv 1, Shiv 2, or Shiv and Shiv Dutt? And I was like a young kid. I was like, you can call me Shivy. That's so he laughed and he said, I am not gonna call you Shivy. I guess he suspected that that's what my mom calls me, right? Which is true.
Yeah.
So it was really good. I'm really grateful for them. They took me on, they paid me well. It was really good learning. I contributed also a little bit. Some of the lessons I learned, and yeah, they really trained me well. Like the trading environment is it's high pressure and all, but the guys would take the time to train me up, and I'm really grateful for that. There were a few lessons I took from that experience, which one was that I till now hated finance, right? And I was like, hey, I was so wrong, because finance had that same quantitative flavor that math did, and these guys were equally, if not more smart. That's number one. Number two is everything moved faster. Like at Princeton, I remember seeing Andrew Wiles' Fermat's last theorem. He took 7 years to prove it, right? And then to find a mistake, somebody found a mistake in this thing, and then another couple of years, and then it was finally proven, right? So like a decade-long thing, so people spend years and years in problem, and then they may not have solved it, and only like 5 people in the world can understand that proof, right? It's in some ways, it's very demotivating. Finance, excuse me, everything you're doing was actually used in real time. And there's the opportunity to make a lot of money. And till now, I didn't care about money because I wasn't paying for anything, right? But now I was paying for my own rent and stuff. And I was like, actually, money may not be that bad, right? Then it just, I received this feedback about real world, and finance seemed a lot more real world. New York, there was, this energy and hustle bustle. So those are some lessons I learned when I started loving finance. I was like, hey, actually, I'd love to make my career here. That was one thing. The second thing I learned is that programming is just really, really so important. And like at Princeton, I had done mostly math, physics. I'd done a little bit of computer science, and more of it was more the theoretical, math-related stuff. I'd done a little bit of practical as well. But my kind of vision was that math and physics are very pure. Computer science is very technical, can be trained later. It's not, as deep and rich. But now, kind of being in the real world, I saw that like these guys, they were building the models, so they were like the quants. They were also trading, but they had also programmed the systems. And the main role they wanted me to do was to program. So there's a lot of demand for that, to actually create systems, and there's a lot of value to be added there. And a lot of the computer science, and it was very theoretical. So I was like, hey, actually, practical hardcore computer science skills, early stage in my career, would be really, really, really strong. So that's another lesson I learned. Another lesson I learned is that, hey, listen, I'm really not that smart, because I worked on a lot of projects, right? It was a 6-month internship. It potentially could have translated into full time if I'd like knocked it out of the park, and I didn't, So I remember when I moved on, it was I looked at it as a failure. I think I did a good job, but I could have done so much better. And so I till today I think about like, hey, if I was to go through that, if I was thrown in that situation again, how would I have done it differently? How would I have put myself on a better track? So so those are some of the major lessons I took from that. Those were
Got it. And what it reminds me of is, again, you have this mindset shift almost like where you spend initial years of academics in thinking that okay, there are certain things that are pure, then there are certain things that are not, and then your mind is slowly moving into a phase where you start realizing and appreciating, the things that work in real life, the 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 disciplines and the subjects that adds value in real life, make a tangible difference in real life, and that's I can see the transition happening from a pure play academic mathematician to an applied mathematician, a practitioner, so to say, and moving into the area of finance, going deep into there and finding a lot of joy in bringing different topics together, different subjects together, such as programming, like you said. Programming, almost like a overlap of subjects, right? You have mathematics. By then you have sort of become like functional expert in mathematics, but you're adding a new skill there. You're adding like programming there. Then you're making it your employability is going up. Your skill sets are more diversified now, and that's a lesson for graduates, who are like graduating out of school as well. Constantly try to like update yourself, add complementary skills to yourself. If you're a management person, look at creativity, look at creative solutioning as one of your skill sets. If you are somebody who is into STEM, can you find similar skills like programming to your skill set so that you're more valuable to the job market out there? As an HR professional myself, and I think it's a lot of intersectionalities takes you far ahead than just specializing on one. Also because like you said, you yourself admitted that you may not be the best in both, but the combination of that makes you a very unique product in yourself, and then that can be like bought by different organizations, right?
Yeah.
And at this point, I also want to know how you've taken your journey forward. You started off in the hedge fund, and you have Goldman Sachs, you have True PTS, you have True, Tassat Group also coming up. How did the rest of the journey turn up, and how was it like?
Absolutely. And Gautam, thanks for that summary. Just to touch on one point from there, I think part of it was also always my subconscious plan that I wanted to start off being as pure as possible. Pure math, studying ancient Greek, I studied Sanskrit before that. People often ask me, why are you wasting your time? These are dead languages than ever, And my thing is, I love languages. I felt like I'd always, at some point, pick up French, German, Spanish. It would just happen. But ancient Greek, I never had the chance to do that again, right? Or Russian, go to Russia. Look at Russia now in the middle of. I wanted to go to the root. Like ancient Greek was the root of all Western literature, math, science, art. So I wanted to understand the root, and then I felt subconsciously that'll trickle down, into a apply. So the journey was playing out, and this kind of was my subconscious plan at some point. So So the rest of the journey. So after that experience at Alphadyne, I took up a job with a consulting company in California. It was perfect actually for what I needed at that time. They were basically training you up in very industry specific programming skills, which is exactly what I needed, right? So Java J2E, not Java, that we're done in college and all, actual like Java frameworks that you can use in. So I learned that. It was probably one of the most intense learning periods of my life. In 4 months I was trained up in San Francisco, and then they said, you choose your industry. I said finance. They said, we'll send you a job, and they take a percentage, right? That's their model. So it was great. And now I was hoping for more of an investment bank hedge fund. They sent me to First National Bank in Omaha, which was the largest privately held bank in the US. Now, everybody told me, been in New York City and San Francisco. Now you're going to Omaha, Nebraska, bang in the middle of the country, like cornfield. You're going to have a horrible time. It's a one-horse town, and it really was a one-horse town. There's this one-horse carriage that used to go around in the. But it was one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had, actually, because it was such a different culture again. I was in the Midwest, very different. People
Mm.
known very, very nice. Like in New York, people are way into their 30s, not married, no kids and all. There, everybody's married by the time they're 22, 23, multiple
Mm.
kids by the time they're 25. I had a 9 to 5 job. I couldn't work more even if I wanted to because it was a consulting, right? So I worked with some startups on the side. I actually some Princeton groups and one billionaire family that was starting a hedge fund. So I helped them build out the quant group. There's another tech group that was building out a social search engine. So I actually helped them build out that version. I continued my ballroom dance. I found a partner, competed, made a lot of videos. I got scuba certified. Warren Buffett is based there, so I went to his Berkshire Hathaway meeting. The city transforms; it becomes huge. People from all over the world coming. I went deep into rock climbing. There was a lot of beautiful forests and stuff. And I was in downtown Omaha, and the old market part of it. So Nebraska is cornfield. Omaha is like one big city, and downtown Omaha is like the place where everything's happening. So there was quite a lot of stuff happening, and there was like this one tall building. Like the New York skyline is like this, or like this. Omaha is like this, and then one tall building, First National Bank, where I worked. So Omaha was amazing. I think I built a lot of experience. It was really, really growing up. I socialized a lot. I learned a lot. There's some Princeton people there as well. It was just I'm really, really glad I did that. I'm really, really glad I did that. But I wanted to get back to New York. So after that contract was over, I started interviewing, and I got a job with Goldman Sachs. I got a job with a few different groups actually, but Goldman Sachs and their Frontline team. That's the one, and I jumped at because Goldman, big name. The Frontline team was really, really smart people. In the row I was sitting, they were like not on my team, but in the row there were like 3-4 people from Princeton. So I was like, hey, I feel at home here. And the foreign exchange frontline team that I was on, it was basically managing the whole foreign exchange platform, trading
Right.
platform. And it was more than 50 billion US dollars was flowing through it every day. So I was like, wow, this is high impact. I was sitting right with the traders and everything. So I jumped at that and I took that on. But I very quickly got disillusioned with it because,
Mm.
everybody in my role, I feel like they said it takes 10 months for you to really understand the system properly to be able to support it properly. After
Yeah.
9 months, I was ready to move on actually to another role. And so I was young and patient also, but also saw the
Yeah.
people around me and like everybody on my team, they were 3-4 years in the same role before they moved to a slightly adjacent role. So,
Yeah.
and I was like, that can't be me. I need to be growing faster, right? This is just, I don't have time.
Mm.
There's a lot of bureaucracy. Goldman says they're a meritocracy, and they are to some extent, but there are a lot of practices and all they did that I didn't like. Also, like FX traders lost billions in a set of trades that year. So everybody's end
Mm.
of year was bad, really bad. And I was like, hey, I feel really detached from the outcome, right? I'm being
Mm.
penalized for stuff that wasn't in my control. It just felt detached.
Yeah.
So I talked to my manager. Normally, you're supposed to be, when you join Goldman, you have to be in a role for a year and a half before
Mm.
you can apply for any other role in the company. But I
Yeah.
talked to my manager and I told him, hey man, like in fact there was a team that liked me and I liked them, and so I told him it was a quant group, and I told him, hey, I really want to go for this. So he was really supportive. He broke the rules, bent the rules for me, and he let me interview. Now they managed to fill that with somebody else, so I was like in this awkward situation where they knew I wanted to move on, and so I knew my days there were kind of numbered. So I started looked externally, and then I got this role with a really cool company called trueEX. Started by a gentleman named Sunil Hirani. He was from India, but moved to the US a long time ago. He
Mm.
had done a very successful company before called CreditX, for credit default swaps, built an exchange for them. So like the New York Stock Exchange, but for different products. He had sold that with some other subsidiaries for, I think, over $800 million. So now he was doing the
Yeah.
same thing for interest rate swaps. Interest rate swaps is huge. It's a $500-600 trillion market, or it was back then,
Right.
on notionals. That's not the money being exchanged, but the actual notional underlying. So six
Got it.
hundred trillion dollars. So I was like, hey, this guy's done it before, right? They gave me a good amount of equity. It was Goldman. We had 8 people in New York, 8 people in London, 8 people in Tokyo, Hong Kong. Here it was just me and my boss. So 2 people, so much more responsibility. And they were paying me
Mm.
more on the base than in Goldman. Goldman really undercuts people on the base, especially young people, because they know they're like for the brand name, right? So I was like, hey, this is like a no-brainer. I got to take this, right? What I didn't
Mm.
question very deeply with TrueX is the business model, right? Everything was good. They had a lot of good things going for themselves. Yeah, Sunil Rani is like very famous. He's even acted in Hollywood movies and stuff. But what the business model they were doing was very, very difficult because their clients were focusing on dealer to customer, so hedge fund to big bank trading. But the
Right.
banks have their own trading platform. So it's like you're telling your customers to not use their platform and use your platform. It's a very difficult model to crack.
Got
So
it.
torn up because that now they're in the middle of a big lawsuit. There's a lot of anti-competitor. We don't need to go into that. But from trueEX grew, right? A lot of other companies started. So True PTS, which was a post-trade processing platform. Then we noticed that crypto is starting to get regulated. We have the infrastructure and the regulatory infrastructure, technical and regulatory infrastructure for an exchange. Let's do that for crypto. So we started this company called Virtuoso, which became Tacit. Then we started a blockchain payments platform with Signature Bank, 60 billion. It's gone under now, but in the latest crisis. But so we started a range of companies. I was involved in all of them, and rapid learning, rapid growth. So this was really the start of my journey in hardcore entrepreneurship, right? Because I saw how startups are doing at a grassroots level. I saw the mistakes people are making. So I think I learned a lot from the experience. I did a lot of startup stuff on the side as well. Worked with a lot of companies. One of the most successful ones was a podcast actually called Young and Profiting, which we grew from basically nothing. It was three of us. There was one main founder, Hala, and two others, me and this guy, Tim, who grew it up from nothing to a top self-improvement podcast on Apple. So now we've had everybody like Matthew McConaughey, Hollywood actors, multiple billionaires, Robert Kiyosaki, top authors, Mark Manson, like just everybody's been on the show, and it's kind of like the Tim Ferriss podcast, similar. So so I learned a lot about startups and stuff. But trueEX ran into this lawsuit. The payments platform was doing very well, but we closed Signature Bank, and then Sunil Hirani, kind of like Steve Jobs was let go from Apple, he was kind of let go from Tacit. It was a similar story, and because he had a grand vision, the investors kind of had a very different vision. They forced him to get into this lawsuit, and so he didn't. So he closed Signature Bank with nothing, with the words from his mouth, right? Because he has such a good track record. We had like 6 years after that, and they could not close a bank for 3 years. 3 years, right? And now they've got several other. That's doing very well. They had a while ago raised a big Series C. But the lesson I learned was that founder-led companies are so important, because that's your baby, right? It's like giving your newborn to somebody else. They're not going to have the same level of care and attention. And so we had many CEOs come and go, and they added value, but they were not able to. And then years later, and so the sales cycles got so long in enterprise that I got really demotivated. So I started applying for new roles, and it was actually really hard, because now I was at a point in my career when I was younger, right? I got roles left, right, and center, because I would, now I was at a point in my career where I wanted to get something where I really found valuable, right? But those roles just didn't seem to exist, or I wasn't able to get them for some reason. And people weren't sure where to fit me. Is he a project manager? Is he a developer? Is he a quant? Is he so I applied for a lot of different things. And towards the end of my process, so for all of those, listeners who are struggling with jobs and all, I applied for like a year and a half. I was obviously working my main job and all, but on the side, I kept looking at roles and all. I was being fussy, but I could not find a good fit. So it's a hard market, right? And this is after all the stuff I've already done. Towards the end of it, I received several offers from actually several good startups, and I think I finally cracked the game, and really good ones. But I decided not to take them, and that's probably one of our next stories. But that's
right.
been
Got it. A very, very interesting journey, because you've had multiple different companies with multiple different flavors, and you've kind of taken lesson from each of it, and then you moved on. And I think, like you said, like you perfectly summed up, it's important to be spending time on the ground, looking at startups, understanding the mistakes before you build one, so that you don't go through the same cycle of mistakes. You don't reinvent the wheel, so to say. It's a great lesson for anybody out there who's wanting to pursue entrepreneurship as an career option. So in this journey, I just want to spend some time on the content, the people that has inspired you. Anything that comes to top of the mind that kind of made you say, hey, this is entrepreneurship is the one for me. Any sort of books, movies, podcasts? Just love to know that.
Great question, Gautam. I appreciate all your intelligent questions. So, I listened to a lot of podcasts when I was in New York City, and I always try to multitask. So, like, let's say I was going to work in the morning, right? I've always actually been fortunate to live very closely to work. The longest I ever lived once from work was a 20-minute walk. On that 20-minute walk, I would be listening to a podcast. I'd be doing like pranayam, breathing exercises. I'd sometimes meet a friend or two along the way very quickly. So I always trying to make things turbocharged. Sometimes do some thinking on what I'd be doing during the day. So I listened to a lot of podcasts, everything, finance podcasts, investing podcasts, self-improvement podcasts, business podcasts. I also read a lot of books. I kind of changed in the working world to a lot of business and self-help, Now, and then I think one of the also key things that really got me into entrepreneurship was, so listening to all this startups and entrepreneurship is kind of the zeitgeist, the style and fashion of the times almost, right? And then seeing some examples like this friend Tim who got me into the podcast, right? I saw the evolution of the podcast, right? Going from nothing to like this super thing making millions of dollars in revenue, and which is unheard of for podcasts, right? Like they don't make money. To getting all these star guests and to the value that I was able to add, and I was like, hey, in the workplace, I just like at Goldman Sachs, I felt disconnected from the outcome. Even the startups I was working on, because I was not the final decision maker, right? These long business sales cycles and all. And I've always been kind of like like you kind of summarized this really well. You said, Shiv, it seems like you do a lot of things, able to add value and create unique value from that, right? I was never like a superstar developer. I was never like a superstar salesperson. In fact, I pushed myself to get into sales. Like trueEX, right? I was on the tech ops side, but I said, hey, I'm going to cold call. I went to the CEO, Sunil Irani, and I told him, let me cold call these hedge funds. Because our sales team is a lot of old guys. They have great relationships with JP Morgan, Citadel, all these big names. But there's so many smaller hedge funds. They don't have relationships. We don't even know they exist. So let me cold call them. So I did that. I did that for 6 months, right? I got the data and all. And I think 2 people eventually converted from that. So, nothing crazy. But so, and, I was just interested in everything. I wanted to understand how everything worked with the vision that probably at some point I'll be doing my own thing. And it's really, really important. Like, for example, somebody like Sunil Irani, right? He was amazing, right? But he wasn't involved in everything. And he doesn't have to be, probably shouldn't be. But I often, would tell people that maybe that's the difference between him and somebody like Mark Zuckerberg. Because Mark Zuckerberg actually coded Facebook himself, right? Or the Google guys. Right. And so I think it's really important to understand how everything fits together. And so I would listen to a lot of podcasts. The Tim Ferriss podcast was a big one. And I would also try and take whatever I was doing. So like, hey, I'm involved in the crypto space. I'm involved in the finance space. I was doing a lot of personal investing. So my background in Wall Street was mostly quant finance, mostly high frequency trading, managing these platforms, trading platforms. But for my own personal investing, I was doing a lot of long-term Warren Buffett buy and hold type of thing. And I've done very, very well from that, I think over a decade, my IRR is actually better than Warren Buffett's for now. I've received a lot of help, obviously, also it's not been my own work. But so yeah, there were a lot of influences, but a lot of business podcasts, business self-help books, that whole niche, that genre.
Wonderful. So here I want to segue into your, we want to get into the core of your startup experience. As you mentioned, Yap, and just want to dive a little deeper. Of course, you have Yap podcast. You've been in the leadership team of that. You've been also involved with DS Marriage Advisors. You've been involved with Tulsi Capital. You've been part of a social search engine called Hijibu. You've been also part of this itinerary building app called Local Nav. And then the most latest and the most the most passionate project of all, MeaVana. So I want to know more about that, how that journey kind of spanned out. What was the learning from each of this, and how different were these? Because I can see that each of these for starters were doing different things. They were belonging to different domains. I'm sure that they had a different business model. A podcasting model is completely different from let's say, financial advisor model. The way they work, the way the roles that they that startup would carry, and the way even the businesses make money are completely different. So how do you kind of adapt? How do you understand? What is the motivation to get in also? A lot of things packed into one.
Absolutely, Gautam. It's kind of that same belief that everything can be trained, right? I believe business can be trained, excuse me. And I just felt this insatiable desire to learn and grow. So I was in my main job, I was reading all these resources, learning from that. But then I also felt that, hey, I'm only getting exposed to one field of quantitative finance, interest rate swaps at time, and that just seemed too little. So I wanted to be involved in something or the other always, in my free time and extra time, weekends. It's just been a habit, and I think, exactly. The intentional goal was to be in different domains, to just see how they do the same lessons apply, different markets. For example, I had a French roommate when I was in working Goldman Sachs, and he was doing arbitrage trading, so he was in the US market, but he was also in the Latin American market. And then for some complex products, some ETFs, there were arbitrage opportunities that you can only do at high frequency, So when you have all these things together, then you can do. He was 25, 26 years old, and he was making over $500,000, right? And that was so how did he do that? You have to have all these, you have to be involved in multiple markets. So I wanted to be involved in multiple things, and I wanted to learn lessons. Now, a lot of these startup experiences, I learned a lot, I added value. none of them was a smashing success. Or even, I mean, some of them, like I think the Hijibu, the social search engine that sold, the technology was sold, but they didn't do what they set out to do. And I've done a lot of other stuff which we haven't even talked about. Stuff like Teespring, customizing t-shirts and selling them online. I've learned some lessons from there that I apply to my startup now. For example, there were millionaires made from Teespring, so they manage all the creation, this, that for you. You just have to make a design and you have to market, so they create the t-shirt for you, and then you can sell the t-shirt for $10 and they take $7 and you make the difference. So you have no cost, you don't have to put in any money, and only the advertising costs, if anything. Now, there were guys there who had become millionaires, and they would do t-shirt designs for St. Patrick's Day, and it seems so easy. Hey, St. Patrick's Day's come, it's a big thing, make a design, go sell it, right? Or advertise it, run a Facebook ad. But, those guys, they were doing 100+ designs for St. Patrick's Day, and one or maybe two of them would then go viral. So all the others would be duds and failures, So the same thing when we're doing ads on or we're doing social media strategies and all, we know that those are the numbers. Actually, you have to do hundreds of things and one or two may work, That's the work you got to put in. So that's a lesson I learned, Local lab, the itinerary building, I learned a lot from that guy, from the guy who started. He was like, he would tell me that he would tell me, Shiv, that he is an engineer by design. He was doing a lot of biz dev stuff. He was not doing the engineering. He had a tech team. I was managing it. But he said, Shiv, I'm an engineer at heart, but I'm doing the biz dev stuff. For me, I feel it's so interesting because I learned a lot by myself, because I feel for me, it's actually the opposite. I feel like Sunil Hirani, who also studied engineering, but he was like really a sales guy. Like he closed Signature Bank with just the words from his mouth, right? 6 years after that, couldn't close a single bank, even much smaller ones. I feel for me, it's very similar. I think I'm a salesperson at heart, or a biz dev person at heart, but I'm doing the engineering stuff and the tech ops and leading tech teams. So you have to understand also what's true to your personality. You have to do everything. You have to understand everything, but you have to understand where your weaknesses are and fill those in. So I think I've learned a lot. Tulsi, right? I learned a lot from how to work with people, what kind of investors you can trust, what you can, and because like one of the investors pulled out their money, the hedge fund collapsed. How do you have to really understand the investor very deeply. Is this somebody you can rely on, right? And if they pull their money out, do you have an alternative? So we're very careful with that with MeaVana. Now I have an investor who I can trust completely. So I think each of them, there's been a lot of learning, there's been a lot of experience, and I'm certainly DS Maris Advisors. I learned that it's amazing what you can do when you have an idea. And, I took some ideas from my senior thesis there at Princeton. I had the programming skills, I had the idea, and then back tested, and it did really well. We never ran in production. I don't know, he may have, but so it's like when you have an idea and when you have the path and you have the tools, right? And you can just put it into implementation. It's just an amazing feeling, And so we're applying that same thing here. So yeah, there's been learnings from each of them, but none of them was a grand success except for the podcast. The podcast was very, very successful. And it's very interesting. The podcast was the last one I did, right? That was the most mature one. That's the one where I understood the time. Even from the podcast, a lot of the team building models, like I built out teams, a lot of the outreach models. Like when I was at the podcast, I tried really hard to get Guy Kiyosaki, Richard Poddad on the show, right? Couldn't get him. A few months later, they managed to get him, So what works, what doesn't work? And by the way, on the podcast, I was listening to all these shows, right? So there's a lot of self-improvement. For example, when I go out with drinking with friends and stuff, right? Let's go to a cafe. I'll often have a matcha tea. And it doesn't taste very nice and all. And my friends are having like these lovely cold coffees. And they'll ask me, why am I having it? And they'll see my pained expression all. Because, I prepared. Actually, on some of those podcasts is my voice completely. I've done some solo episodes as well. But I prepared for one of the podcast shows where we interviewed this guy from Tenzo Tea, the matcha tea company that was taking over LA and the West Coast at the time. We think green tea is healthy, right? Matcha has 10 times the antioxidants and 1/10 the caffeine that green tea has. It's a superfood, So when you see that, even if it's like disgusting, you want to have it, right? If you're interested in health, So similarly, so many other things, right? You learn from the podcast, learning, training for these guys. I was leading the research team, so each guest had to be researched really, really in depth, So there was just massive self-growth and self-improvement from all of these areas. And yeah, we're using them all now in MeaVana and Manifold Ventures.
Got it. That matcha tea example reminds me of I'm trying to connect your fascination, your interest for matcha tea to your wanting to stay pure, because you identified green tea as pure, and now you found that matcha tea even purer in terms of the value that it gives, and now you've gone to the purer version of the tea. So I mean, I'm trying to connect the dots here. So there is that pattern there as well. And also, I'm also seeing a slow but steady shift in the way that you identify yourself as you've started while in school and in early days of college, you identify yourself as a purely mathematician. You moved into applied mathematics, and you slowly start identifying yourself as somebody who's getting into business thick of things, programming a little bit. Then now you start identifying yourself as a salesperson. Now, it's a contrasting journey, but at the same time, it shows the evolution of a person also in this span of what, 10, 20, 30 years. So it's great to see a person evolve and start to find oneself and then succeed in there. So that's a great point to, kind of dig deeper into the latest startup venture, which is MeeVana. I just want to know your thoughts, your vision, where I mean, what kind of a founder or entrepreneur would you want to be as part of MeeVana, and where do you see it growing?
Absolutely. So Manifold Ventures is really my company, and we're working with one
Yeah.
investor who's really like a co-founder. She's much older, she's in her 60s, and MeaVana is our main baby, is our main experiment. But the plan is to be doing a lot of projects. In fact, actually, we're starting a couple of new projects very, very soon. That's the plan. We've already done some other work, but MeaVana is the main project. So I guess for the listeners, MeaVana is when you're on your browser and you open a new tab and you get that boring plain Google page, right? What MeaVana does is it takes that page and it super personalizes it. So it makes it really customizable, really personalized. So let's say you like pictures of horse riding, right? It'll show you beautiful pictures of horse riding. Let's say you like inspirational quotes or dark quotes or whatever. It'll show you those kind of quotations. It'll give you information. Whatever news feeds that you read and all, it'll have those pinned directly by default. Let's say certain productivity tools you use, things like alarms, timers, stopwatches, multi-search, saving seconds with each search. It'll have those customized for you. So it's like this really personalized dashboard. And it's still in the relatively early stage. It's already like 10x more advanced than anything out there. But we still think it's in infancy. It's going to get much, much more advanced. So it's going to be, it's going to be like an AI. You'll be able to talk to it. We already have things like ChatGPT and all integrated. So basically, anything that you're doing on the internet, you'll be able to do faster, more efficiently, more effectively on MeaVana. We're also entering into the phone space. We've got a few phone apps out there already that already have usage. We haven't really been advertising them. And we're also starting an enterprise angle. So we don't know the many different ways that MeaVana could go. We may start our own browser. We may, because Chrome has a lot of problems around privacy. The browser space is also ripe for disruption. We may segue into something. We may let MeaVana grow on the side and start other projects. There's a lot of different ways it can go. But one vision, right, potentially one vision is that MeaVana is intended to be the start of everybody's digital journey. So let's say you're on your laptop, your desktop, right? And you open your browser, what shows up by default, just like when you open your computer, Microsoft computer, you get that beautiful screen, right? They show a picture. It's like that, except that you're spending more time on this and there's more tools. So MeaVana is the start of it. You open your phone, right? We actually have a launcher as well. So the first thing you see is MeaVana. You swipe left, you get notes, productivity. You swipe right, you get your news, and you have a beautiful picture and a quote that's interesting to you. Let's say you're on an aeroplane, right? The first thing that comes up, this is not the reality right now, but we're at some day. The first thing that you see is MeaVana, and from there you go. Let's say you're on your television, right? And you're not watching anything right now. The first screen that comes up. So we want MeaVana to be the start of everyone's digital journey. In fact, the name itself, Mea, right, means Ma in Latin, and Van is like forest in Hindi, right? Forest or sanctuary. So the idea is MeaVana is your digital sanctuary, and just like Nirvana is your state of perfect peace, MeaVana is your digital place of perfect peace. So that's really the vision with MeaVana, but the vision with Manifold Ventures is even bigger.
Wonderful. And the name itself is very, very, very meaningful. I think I didn't think of it, but thank you for that. So what it reminds me is when I first stumbled upon MeeVana is, I've spoken to you as well, is the idea of super apps being brought into the ecosystem of a browser. I could see what Paytm is doing to India in terms of finance, payments, and banking and shopping and so many other streams being brought together into a single platform, which is now duplicated by different other service providers as well. And WeChat in China is doing even more so, allowing people to chat, allowing people to pay, shop, to have all these different, life experiences, both commercial and non-commercial, all in one space, and to be leveraging, that experiences to give a very seamless, personalized experience to a user. So I think that is where the world is going, and at least in Asian markets, from the podcast I listened, is somewhat suited for that, because people want to spend, people want to have all in one place so that it becomes easier for them. It becomes, so they know the interface, they know the branding, they know the color scheme, they know where to go. So they're familiarized with a certain app or a certain platform. and it's easier to navigate to do multiple things the same platform because the mind is kind of used to the behavioral patterns that needs a person to go in different do different things, right? So there's a lot of behavioral science aspect to what you're doing, and I appreciate that. A lot of people, a lot of um, startups don't recognize the way mind works, and you've done that. You've done your research, and it's fascinating. And while and I've also spoken to you about multiple different use cases in the future. Also, being able to give access to a community of personally disabled folks, people with disabilities, people with vision impairment, elderly people, and people who are first-time users of laptops or PCs, native users of languages. A lot of different communities you can target and make life easier for them, right? I
Yeah.
think that's fascinating what you're doing.
Thank you, Gautam. I appreciate it. Yeah, and I appreciate all your inputs, all great inputs.
Yeah. So I also want to know, what is your personal? Now you're a founder. You are leading teams and you're managing investors. What are some of the life lessons that that maybe like thumb rules that you stick by, so that the people who are listening who wants to get into and wants to build something like this, maybe should remember while doing that.
Absolutely. Gautam, there's so many. So the lessons, I think, for each person are very, very different. But I think some of the lessons are you know your why. Your why is very, very important. One thing Elon Musk had said, for example, you may take a project that you just know from the outset is most likely going to fail, right? Why would you do
Hmm.
such a project, right? So
Yeah.
Musk talks about, you multiply the probability of success with the importance of a project. And some
Hmm.
projects like saving humanity or making humans multi-planetary are just so important, right, for the survival of the
Yeah.
species if an asteroid comes and
Hmm.
hits us, that even if the risk, even if it's mostly likely going to fail, you still do it anyways because the importance is so high. So know your why,
Yeah.
right? Maybe you want to do a success, you want it to be a 95% success outcome, right? And you want to make some money for your family, for your loved ones, right? The
Yeah.
importance is not so. You may work in the podcast space, the importance of the project is not so high, right? You just want that cash flow and revenue share. So know your
Hmm.
why. That's very important, because if you don't know your why and you're not clear on your why, it's very easy to kind of deter and change values. And some of the biggest things come from inconsistency and ambiguity, and not gnosis auton, the ancient Greek phrase of know
Hmm.
yourself, right? So we
Hmm.
just one has to really know oneself and know what's important for you at that period of time. It may change, as
Yeah.
we've seen, a person changes over time. So that's one very important lesson. A second lesson is entrepreneurship is hard. I mean, everything's hard. Like working in a job is hard. Working for a boss is hard. Starting your own
Hmm.
company is hard. Being in early stage, actually everything is hard. So the thing is, choose your hard, right? That's the new phrase. So everything is hard. Just choose your hard. But entrepreneurship is really hard, and I've often had this vision. This is, I mean, I don't know, maybe this is like the similar to the Battle of 300 that but I remember, I think there was one friend on Facebook, and she had this picture of, like, there was a military. I don't even know where it was from. It was from years ago, and there was this one person who was just like advancing against that whole military, right? So there's like this whole row of like people with guns and stuff, and this one person with one, I don't know what, and the person was just advancing. That image really stuck in my mind. And I
Hmm.
just feel like entrepreneurship sometimes is like that. That can excite you, right? Because the world is configured in a certain way, right? When you're doing a startup,
Hmm.
basically what you're saying is something very arrogant. You're saying that this is the world, this is my idea of how the world should be. I'm going to create something that's going to change the structure of the world. And so
Hmm.
it's kind of like you're going against the grain, right? And everything's out to
Right.
kill you. And like companies like Google and all, they've seen Google says do no evil, that's their motto. But the amount of startups that they've killed, right, is
Yeah.
just incredible, right? They're ruthless. So
Yeah.
so if that image excites you, and you can
Hmm.
imagine yourself being shot at, but there's constantly rebounding, and if that's exciting for you, Elon Musk talks about doing a startup as like chewing broken glass and staring into the abyss, right? So it's going to be hard, but if that
Hmm.
excites you and your why is strong enough, then I think it's a potentially a good path from you. Other than that, I think it's very often startups are segmented. Like I'm a solo
Hmm.
founder, and a
Hmm.
lot of like Y Combinator and all usually doesn't invest in solo founders. Our investor also usually doesn't. She says she's made an exception for me, but usually she would not. Um, so this may be unique to me, but I think very often startups, what they do is they'll get a CTO, a CMO, a CEO,
Hmm.
you know, and that can work, but very often more likely, that'll fail, right? Because there's too much
Hmm.
diffusion of responsibility. So like right now, I'm managing the tech team, I'm doing the HR, I'm doing the marketing, I'm doing the biz dev, I'm doing everything. I have a lot of help, right? but I'm the final person for everything, right? And there's really that belief that for a startup to succeed, right, 95% plus, I don't know what the exact number is, but startups fail, right? Because with a startup, usually 10, 20 things have to go right for it to succeed. And even if each of those has an 80% chance of success, when you multiply it together, it becomes less than a 5% chance, because each of those things have to work. You have to have the investor, you have to have continual funding, you have to do the right marketing, you have to write the right product. Like with MeaVana, we had a product really good, right? Really excellent product. But then we found it's so hard to get discovered, and then so there's a lot of things that have to go right. So point being is, usually for a startup to see, there should be at least one person, right? Or maybe even just one person, otherwise there's diffusion of responsibility, who's willing to die before that project fails. So I'll give you an example. I talked to an African dating startup recently, right? Very impressed. They were already making revenue, thousands of dollars. They've just started, they had an interesting angle and all. But there were some things that were missing, right? And I told the guys, right, and they started laughing, but I think they took it to heart. I told the guys, like, what I'm missing is, like, I need to, like, they were like, hey, if this doesn't work, we'll do this project, we'll do that project. If this doesn't work, we'll do. I was like, hey, what I need to hear from you is that, like, this is what I'm doing, this is why it's important, and I'm willing to die before this fails. Then I'm like, then they were looking to raise money. Then I'm like, okay, I'm interested in so at some point, Manifold Ventures, we would really like to do an entrepreneur in residence kind of model, where we get entrepreneurs, we fund them, we can help them out. So I've often been thinking, like, what would I be looking for in entrepreneurs when I do that, And I think part of it, like, one thought I've had, this is just crazy thought, is probably even illegal, so I'm not even, just take this with a grain of salt. But one thing I would have is maybe some kind of pain tolerance test, and just imagine, like, if the people startups, and it's kind of like, just imagine, like, during battle, right? Like when enemy soldiers are captured and stuff, and they're being tortured to death to reveal secrets, right? Like, there are times, instances where people haven't revealed those secrets, and what has, like, motivated them to go through, like, extreme pain and not be able to. So I think if a founder can go through extreme pain and then still be willing to work on their idea, right? Because those extreme pain times will come for sure, right? Guaranteed.
Yeah.
There will be demands some other time. We talked about work-life balance before, but, like, like Kobe Bryant said, in some ways there isn't really work-life balance. You can't, be good at the arts and have a life and have, support your family and be a stellar, like, the opportunity cost, whatever you're doing, right? Whenever you're helping somebody, you're not helping 10,000 other people, So everything comes with opportunity cost. So I think having just huge tolerance to pain and an immense belief in oneself. And then finally, I think scenario analysis is very important. I think I've gotten stronger this with time. I'm a chess player, and one thing you can chess is, like, if then scenarios, right? If this happens, that happens. You don't have to calculate everything out. You can do a lot of things through intuition. But I think that's very important in startups as well. Like, one thing we've done with MeaVana, right, is we have so many pivots, right? If this doesn't work, we can do that. If that doesn't work, we have a travel angle, we have an enterprise angle, we have a celebrity angle, we have a fandom angle, we have a retail angle, we have a beautiful landscapes angle, we have a productivity angle, we have a health angle. It's like there's, like, infinitely many pivots we can do. So we can just keep going. We have a browser angle, we have a phone angle, we have a so it's just, like, failure is almost not an option, where like, it's like, if one thing fails, we just try the next thing. And the final thing is, I would say that it's kind of just, like, it's really good to be able to get into a habit where you can fail fast and iterate and learn and keep doing, keep moving forward. Because a lot of entrepreneurs I've talked to, and I've seen this in my life, like, I don't know, some people would say I'm a success, but if I look at my life, and I feel like I mostly failed at everything. There's some successes here and there, but and that's really what entrepreneur, mostly failing. You try things, right? But if you want to stop looking at them at failures, and I used to take it really personally when I was younger, like that hedge fund job, right? I didn't make it, Now it's much different. No, it's like the expectation is failure, especially with entrepreneurship. But you keep pivoting and tweaking, and you keep trying till you find that perfect product market fit. And sometimes it's not even your fault. Sometimes it's just, you may have a great idea and maybe perfect product, but the market just doesn't care about it. You may be ahead of your time, So I think these are some of the lessons I would really, really kind of impart to budding founders and entrepreneurs.
Fascinating. I think a lot of takeaways here, including the most fascinating one of is the pain tolerance. I think that's a bit a lot of people will fail to see, because they get a lot of people around me also glamorize and romanticize entrepreneurship a lot, because it's, for them, it's also an escape from their mundane, regular day work. They see sort of an escape, where it's a fancy world where there's everything falls in place, start minting money, everything, products happen on its own. So, which is not the case. Like you said, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of sacrifice of your own personal time, maybe for the relationship as well. So, maybe, when you are starting that residency, maybe that could be a module that can, double down on. So maybe even an assessment, maybe even like a personal sort of assessment a person can do where they find, okay, this is my personal rule at this point. Maybe if I cross the threshold, I am probably set for like something like an entrepreneurship. Fascinating points there. I want to go into the last segment and probably the most important one. If somebody, and I know that you are somebody who believes in developing lateral skills other than your main skill. Um, you know, as a budding entrepreneur, what are some of those courses or skills? You don't have to specify exact courses. Maybe some topics would do. What are some of the topics that both technical and non-technical that somebody can take up and that adds value both as a person and also as a professional and also, if possible, as a future entrepreneur?
Absolutely. Gautam, it's a really good question. I think it really varies from person to person. So the answer actually would
Hmm.
really depend from person because no two people, everybody's a different snowflake. But if we had to generalize, I think probably some things are identify your weaknesses. We all have weaknesses. Nobody's perfect. And then probably take some courses to get up to sufficiency in them. Usually with
Yeah.
anything, right? To get up to 80% sufficiency, which is to an outside world you look great, is very easy. It's after it gets progressively harder. For example, like let's say chess. Right? I'm on chess.com, which has I forget how many players, but millions of players, right? I'm in the I'm I think 99.7 percentile. So meaning out of 1,000 players that they're there, and these are people who have memberships, they're regular players. For example, my father's a strong player, he's not on there, right? If there's 1,000 players, I would defeat 997 of them. You know, but the last 0.3% is like really hard, right? Like it'll take me years, decades to kind of now go for that. So, but to get to
Yeah.
80%, you can do that in less than a year. You can do that in 3 months, probably, if you focus and devote attention. So identify your weaknesses because a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, right? So you never want your
Right.
weakness to be so crippling that you're doing really
Mhm.
well, but like let's say everything's going amazing in your startup, but you couldn't secure
Mhm.
funding, game over, right? Or let's say
Yeah.
everything's going well, you build amazing product, you have funding and all, but you can't market and you can't actually get it to people, game over. So
Yeah.
get yourself up to 80% sufficiency, then surround yourself with people who can fill in those holes because you want superstars in every field. So that's one thing. The second thing would be identify your superpowers, right? Like what are you really good at? Like nobody else, like, best in the world or can be best in the world, and then really double, triple down on those, because the world is just too much noise, too many people out there. YouTube rate at which videos are getting uploaded, right? It's just crazy. Like nobody can see like even one tiny percentage of it. So identify your super because the only way you'll stand out, right, is if you can just knock it out of the park with your superpower, and you'll get known from that, right? Like Sadhguru is not known for being a politician or a swimmer, right? Maybe he's good at those
Mhm.
things, but he's known for that one thing. Or Kobe Bryant is known for basketball, right? He's not known for. So you really the world is really and then excuse me, and then to get I think more to your question is and then I would say don't neglect the soft skills. Very often we've seen startups and all where they maybe have a really strong tech team, but they were just lacking in a lot of soft skills, and that can really cripple them. So yeah, just don't neglect the soft skills. Look at every experience, every interaction as a way to improve. And understand personality types and how you can interact with different personalities, right? Because everybody's engaging a different way. As far as resources, Gotham, again, everybody learns differently. Some people learn through reading, some people learn through audiobooks. Like, when I was listening to audiobooks, I'd listen at 3x the speed, to consume information faster. That doesn't work for
Yeah.
everybody. Some people don't like audio. If you listen 3, they can't understand it all. You can't do that for like fiction.
Yeah.
It destroys the fun. They don't enjoy it. So everybody has to find their own style. But I think actually today in today's world, there's a lot of YouTube. You could learn anything from YouTube. For example,
Mhm.
I'm getting back into basketball. I've been playing with a group, a couple of groups actually, and I'll like look at strategies on YouTube and stuff, and they explain really well for the situation that you're in, 4-on-4 half court, right? They'll explain the strategy. Not only that, I'll look at those strategies, I'll go back and play, and I'll be much stronger than the previous time. And
Yeah.
and people will notice. They won't say anything, but you can see, like like I would get so much more respect than on the previous time, and I was like, people are noticing. So I think anything you want to learn, right? Identify what's important to you, weaknesses, strengths. Just YouTube. You don't even have to pay. Like people pay so much for paid courses and stuff. Information is really free in today's age. You may have to spend some time finding the right channel, the right resource, all of that. But I don't know. So YouTube is great.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I want to bring this to an end. So which brings me to the last question. What is your hope for 2024? What is in store for you? What are your growth aspirations, your growth plans, your vision? Um, yeah, we'll love to know that.
Thank you, Gautam. I think 2024 is going to be a transformational year for us. We've struggled. The growth has been slow. We've learned a lot of lessons. We've been starting from scratch. So there's been a lot of learning that's happened. We're lucky to have a patient investor. A lot of investors want to return in 1, 2, 3 years, right? Our investor is very different. She wants to do something significant, but she's in for the long term. So we're very well aligned that way. We've been able to keep our burn rate very low. We've been very frugal. So all that's really good. We're on a growth track. So Gautam, we started the beginning of the year. We had 1,100 active users on MeaVana. As of end March, we had almost 18,000 active users on MeaVana, on the MeaVana network. So there's a main MeaVana and there's several other subsidiary MeaVanas. So my point being is that look at that growth, and the best part is this was with no marketing, zero marketing budget. This is all completely organic. So we used a few growth hacks and tricks. We tried many that didn't work. So we're doing that. We're doing the same thing in the phone space. So if we put our heads down and go to sleep, I think by the end of this year, we'll be at over 100,000 active users, which is great. But if some good things happen, we get a shout out, we work with some influencers, I think that can be several 100,000. So that's what we're working on with the main MeaVana. We're getting involved in the phone space. The phone space is much bigger, right? People on their phones, there's a trend to move on the phone. So we think we've identified gaps there. We think we can be even more significant there. We've already got some phone apps. They're already, even without being listed, like getting ranked, if you search for it, you won't really find it. Already got several tens of users, in a few days. So we're very hopeful for that. We're starting our enterprise angle. So we want to work with some big clients. We want to work with big ticket clients, so Coke, Nike, Mercedes. We want to be charging a minimum of $10,000 a month, which for Coca-Cola made $50 billion in revenue last year. They spent billions of dollars. 10K a month for them is nothing. We think we can add enormous value, actually. So we've just started that process. We've already got some meetings and all lined up. So we're very, very excited. This is a new angle. We're trying to build a new ad model, so it's ads without really being ads and all. So we've got some very exciting things there. Then, Gautam, we're starting some new projects. Because we've done well, we've gained our investors' trust. We've got a soft go-ahead to start some new projects. So we're going to be launching a yoga app, a web app, and a phone app. We've got some really good ideas there. We're also going to be potentially doing a few other things. And this will be the start of the expansion of Manifold Ventures, where we're just going to churn out a lot of products, put them in the market, see what there's demand for, what there isn't. And so I think 2024 is going to be transformational. It's going to be the start of our massive expansion. And then if that goes well, that'll fund a ton of other projects. We have tens and tens, maybe even hundreds of projects that we want to do. So it's going to be really exciting. Fingers crossed, But it's really necessary that these early projects succeed because they'll allow all those other projects to. So right now we're really focusing mostly on the growth. We want to start making some revenue, and that's the plan.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been an amazing conversation. So we touched upon so many topics, starting from mathematics to programming to entrepreneurship. Got to know you a little more personally, understand your personal journey. The struggles you went through, the and how you overcame them, and the transitions you took, and the pivots you made. The lessons you've learned, even from the other so-called failed ventures and failed work experience, the kind of positive energy that you took out. I think that reflects a lot about you as a person. And I think there's a lot of learning from that. I hope this podcast inspires people to take a lot more risk in their life and then stay on with what they commit to. Like you said, the pain tolerance part and staying on part, pivoting part. I think there's a lot of lessons for the entrepreneurs from that. And also for people who are, on a day job, there's a lot of lessons for them to succeed, to be adding new skills to their arsenal and then moving on and then creating value to the business that you're part of. Thank you so much for your time. It's been such a great experience, and thank you for sharing your valuable 1.5 hours from me. Hope to have you soon in the podcast with a lot more news about MeaVana and about yourself in another episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Gautam. Great to be here.
Thank you.